Okay, well, nice to see the committee and the staff here today for the City of Arcata Historic Landmarks Committee special meeting of July 27th, a Wednesday at 4 p.m. Suppose we'll start with the roll call.
Okay. Chair Rich.
I'm here.
Committee Member Perry. Looks like he's saying present. And Committee Member Keefe.
Here.
Okay, and Vice Chair McDonald is absent for the time being. I'll make a note of when she joins us.
Thank you. We do have minutes from our regular meeting last month of June 16th, 2022. And this is our time to approve those minutes for the record.
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, let's do, I guess, a roll call vote on those minutes. Committee Member Keefe.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Chair Rich.
Yes.
And Committee Member Perry.
Yes.
Thank you. Minutes are approved into the record.
Okay, so there is no indication Jill is imminent. Should we keep moving? All right. We'll keep moving down our agenda this evening to the portion of our meeting that allows time for attendees to address this committee or to submit written communications on matters not currently on the agenda. And I do understand that we have some attendees, some of the public here with us tonight.
Does anybody have items that are not on the agenda that they'd like to speak about to the committee?
So raise your hand, your Zoom hand.
Okay, not seeing any.
There will be time for the attendees to comment on agendized items as we come to each one. So with no comment, suppose we'll move through to the old business. We have a report on the results of the historic survey in the Arcata Gateway area.
Great. Thank you, Chair Rich. And I see Jill has joined us. So
yay.
Perfect timing. Give me a second to share my screen here. It's always difficult when you're trying to present something. Okay. Can everyone see my screen without the preview? Yeah, we looking good?
Looking good.
Thank you. Okay, so this presentation is going to be broken up into 3 parts, and it will include information that we presented at the June meeting as well. So be prepared for that. It's going to probably take about a half an hour. So for members of the committee, if you have questions as they come up, feel free to interrupt me and kind of break up my flow here because I'm just going to be kind of droning at you otherwise. So without further ado, so a little bit of background for our attendees, some of which were here at the June meeting or have watched it. But as I was saying, this meeting is building on the meeting that we had on June 16th, which is available for people who haven't seen it if they would like to go back and review it. It's uploaded on the city's YouTube page. And that same information will be provided tonight, but we're going to start with some information that was requested by the public, attendees who came last time and really wanted a little bit more clarification on, what this new list would mean for their property, what the pros and cons would be of being recognized as a potentially historic structure. So we're going to go through that first. So the primary purpose of this work is to really just make sure that as we move forward with the Gateway Area Plan, property owners have a clear sense of what their review process may look like. We want to ensure that when somebody comes to the building counter, they already have a sense of whether or not they would be considered historic and what that would mean for additional review prior to redeveloping their site. And this is mostly important if property owners want to modify their property. If you're not proposing a modification to your site, an exterior modification, either a demolition or a significant alteration, being on this list will have no material impact on your day-to-day for that property. And it's also really important to note, and I will hit on this a couple of times, that what we're doing tonight is not actually modifying the process of review for potentially historic sites. What we're talking about is basically increasing the ability of a property owner to know in advance whether or not they're going to be subject to this process, and trying to really clarify that for the public instead of having more sort of one-off review as people come to the counter and want to make modifications to their sites. So we did have some people request more information on, what are the benefits of making these determinations of historic sites now instead of piecemeal as projects come up. And as I mentioned before, the main reason we're doing this is just to have a very clear sense at the outset of what is considered historic, potentially historic, or not potentially historic, and not requiring additional review. And redevelopment in the Gateway area and, hopefully someday citywide will be easier for sites that are not on this list. So we want to make sure that property owners aren't signed up for a very unpleasant surprise when they come forward and want to invest in their property. And also, there are actual benefits to the property owners in addition to just having a general sense of, how the city will view their property. If they are coming in for a modification, so you do want to do an addition or otherwise alter your property, you will be able to use the historic building code. There are certain things that will benefit you in terms of how the city considers nonconformities, historic nonconformities, and we can even potentially make some parking allowances for sites that are considered historic. And these are pretty typical incentives, and obviously the committee has expressed a lot of interest in continuing to find carrots instead of sticks for people, and we will be continuing to look for additional incentives for property owners with historic properties as we move through the historic element review, which is coming up in the next few months. And finally, if you're put on this list of potentially historic sites, you're not a landmark property. There's no associated ordinance. It doesn't create an overlay zone. None of that applies to these sites, but you can realize additional tax benefits if you do decide to voluntarily landmark your property, and that will open up certain tax savings options for you through the Mills Act. So if anyone in the public has questions about how that program works and what the process is for becoming eligible for it, we can definitely address that, but I'm not going to go into it too much now. So in terms of, what would be the negative aspects of this per property owners being identified as having a potentially significant resource on your site, there really are none unless you want to demolish the existing structure or significantly alter it in a way that we can't find essentially compatibility with the addition to the existing historic resource. And the SOI here on the slide stands for Secretary of Interior Standards. And the Secretary of Interior Standards are basically national, countrywide regulations for modifications to historic properties. And there are some links online that you can easily find out information about these guidelines. And there are 4 general types. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail here because it's a whole rabbit hole of information. And there are definitely committee members more well-versed on these than myself who can speak to them if the public is interested. But typically, what we would be applying in review for these sites is rehabilitation. And rehabilitation is essentially the type of guideline that acknowledges the need to alter or add to a historic property to meet continuing or changing uses while retaining the property's historic character. And that's the definition straight from the NPS website, that's the National Park Service. So there are 10 standards, and what these standards do is basically give guidelines, recommended treatments, and not recommended treatments for additions to historic structures. And the intent is to basically guide property owners away from improvements that would impact the historic character of a structure. And just to kind of give the public a sense of, well, what are these guidelines and how would they be applied to my property? Even though there are 10, I'm going to highlight 3 here that I think are, arguably most important for this discussion. So this first one is distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a historic property shall be preserved. The second is new additions and adjacent or related new construction shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. And then this is the last one, which kind of ties both of those together. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. So this is very jargony, and I apologize. Hope I'm not, overwhelming anyone with this information, but it's just to show, in a transparent way, these are the types of questions we ask ourselves as decision makers when we review modifications to historic structures. And I'm going to kind of use that as guidance to run us through a couple scenarios for how this might actually impact properties that are on this list. But before I do that, anyone on the committee, do you have any, either questions or any sort of additional information you want to provide about the Secretary of Interior standards to make it a bit more understandable for anyone who's listening in?
Well, I would just say that, the term integrity is the key wording in a lot of this, of the guidelines. It's really about, ensuring that any alteration or changes allows anybody walking past that property to go, oh, and still recognize that the property they're looking at has some characteristics that are unique to that structure in many ways. And I think there's another key item there about if you do make an addition or something, it should not mimic the former, makes something historic or important historically in some sense, or design important. It's supposed to stand out, but it's supposed to somewhat kind of meld in well enough so it doesn't detract from how that structure looks in some sense. That's kind of the key item, I think.
Bill, you also were unmuted. Do you want to add anything before I move on?
No, thank you, Dilo.
Okay. So yeah, to Tim's point, the reason that I wanted to showcase these is to say, so you want to do an addition to your property, there is a pathway for us to approve and support that project, but we would want to see it somehow differentiated from the original historic structure, and there would be some considerations that we would be applying. So we're going to do a little bit of like scenario exploration. You're a property owner and you're on this list. What would that mean for various things you might want to do to your property in the future? Okay, first example, you have no actual plans to make any exterior modifications to your structure. You want to do maybe tenant improvements to the interior, or you love your house just the way it is. You don't want to change anything. There is no impact to your property from being put on this list. So that's an easy one. Well, what about if you want to, modify the site and add additional structures? If you want to create an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, basically a new residential unit, this is already streamlined by the state. And what that means is the state has already removed the city's ability to regulate that unless we choose to create a standalone ordinance specific to our town, which we have not yet chosen to do. So there would be no change in process at this time. You could continue to just go straight to the building counter and create an ADU on your lot. what if you wanted to actually just build a new master bed and bath to your site? In that case, the current city process would apply to your site. So again, this is the point I wanted to try and make for people, is that this is likely what would happen anyway. But what it would mean is it might be a surprise to you. You come to the building counter and you want to pull a permit for an addition, and we say, well, wait, we have evidence in the record that the site might be historic, but we haven't had that vetted by the decision makers. We need to put you through that process. So that's what we're trying to do now, is create that certainty for people up front. And what that would require is essentially a historic report that would show how the addition adheres to those Secretary of Interior guidelines that I showed you. Or in the case that the property owner wanted to attempt to contest the finding of historic significance, they would have the option to do that at this time. Otherwise, it would be regulated as a historic structure. And if that is the case, if determined historically significant, and if the report is prepared, the project would be reviewed by the Planning Commission at a notice public hearing. And if staff had any questions about the report or the design, we would likely bring it to Historic Landmarks Committee as well for them to weigh in and provide guidance before we brought it to the Planning Commission, which is what we already are doing. And what if you wanted to demolish the structure to build something new? Or if you wanted to, say, add like a 7-story steeple to your 1-story historic home, and we weren't able to make these compatibility findings. This is the sort of the heavy hitter option here, where we would basically be making this a very difficult pathway, not an impossible pathway. But unless the applicant was able to somehow prove that the site was not historic, should not be regulated as a historic structure, the applicant would be required to prepare an EIR, an environmental impact report, in order to essentially analyze the impact to the historic resource of demolition. And that can be very expensive. So we are trying through this process to keep it to a very refined list in order to reduce the burden to property owners and really focus on the sites that really do bring something special to the city of Arcata. And then this would go to the Planning Commission and the City Council for review, and ultimately, as part of the EIR, they would be required to adopt a statement of overriding considerations, which is a finding that whatever the new development project brought to the city was more important than what the historic resource contributed to the city. And I see that Tim has his hand raised. Do you want to add to that, Tim?
Yeah, just going back to the previous slide, you say something, it goes report from an historian. Do you mean architectural historian? That's what I think you mean there, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we have historically, no pun intended, had some flexibility with local historians if they clearly have a fair amount of experience in a local context, even if they aren't necessarily holding an architectural degree, we may allow them to prepare the report.
Okay.
Alex Stillman falls in that camp, for example. But typically we want somebody who can really apply architectural criteria. And in fact, we have also allowed these reports to be prepared simply by licensed architects, not necessarily by historic resources professionals, but they are architectural professionals and have gone through the training to be able to weigh some of these different criteria related to massing and scale and that kind of thing. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, moving on.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jill, go ahead.
Yeah. What if someone wanted to replace the windows with vinyl?
That's a great question.
I'm sorry to interrupt because I asked a question and then I just interrupted you. That's what I find most frustrates people. They want to do what they consider upgrades to their home. They don't necessarily want to change anything, but they want to modernize it by putting solar on or aluminum siding or vinyl windows. And I think that's the most consternation that I come across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think from Tila, if you don't mind, I'll jump in a little bit here.
Oh, not
I
at
think
all.
that the the committee has provided different opinions for different projects over time, and obviously, as you all well know, there's a fair amount of subjectivity in historic resources identification and preservation processes. And I guess what I would say is that we've had periods in our history where, the committee and the Historic Design Review Commission, when they were active, pushed pretty hard against the idea that you could replace, for instance, wood windows with vinyl, and would have required those properties to replace with wood windows. And then we've had other periods where the committees have said, hey, look, we understand you're, doing the best you can with the resources that you have now to, preserve the structure by, replacing these leaking windows. And windows can be, rebuilt and replaced in the future with wood ones if someone, has the resources to do that. So it's really, I don't think there's a firm and fixed answer to that, Jill, unfortunately, but I do think that, we try and stay in, connection with the Historic Landmark Committee and really rely on the expertise that this body brings forward as a, to help us make those determinations at the counter.
And I would also just note, in the context of this list that we're reviewing tonight, it's a pretty short list, and some of the sites I think have already replaced their windows, for example. I don't know about siding, but I can think of at least one where they already have metal windows that they'll probably need to replace. So there is some flexibility there. It's not like every site that we've identified is perfectly, immaculately preserved necessarily at this point. Okay, so demolition, we just went over. So the last, scenario I wanted to go over is, what if you wanted to move a structure? And basically, the short answer is it's the same process as it is now. Typically, it's an administrative permit done over the counter, and the zoning administrator, as sort of the review authority, does retain the ability to require additional review depending on mostly the context of the site, is my understanding, as well as the resource itself. And David, would you like to add anything to that one before I move on?
Nope, you're doing great. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so in summary, if you aren't planning to make any modifications to your property, there will be no additional process, no real impact to your site as a result of this identification. And modifications that you do make will be subject to the exact same process as you currently would be subject to, but now you know. And likely before there were property owners who would not know. And this is very helpful for staff and the decision makers and the public in that we've refined it down to a relatively short list, which means that remaining structures are not subject to additional review, and applicants can have that clarity now, and staff knows from the decision makers what sites they consider significant and which ones they do not. So that's the end of the first part. So I'm going to spend a couple more minutes just kind of going through the ask for tonight, and then I believe we were planning to open it up for public comment. So is the chair comfy with moving on at this point, or do you want to stop here and see if anyone has any questions?
Well, I think now would be a good time to ask if anybody had any questions.
Okay.
Of our committee members and then the public.
I think, Chair, there's going to be a couple of opportunities for public input, and there are a couple of key decision points throughout the meeting. The next section, you're actually going to go into the method that you all agree to use to go through the list, and then you're going to go through the list. And when Dilo and I were talking before the meeting, it seemed prudent to open public comment just before you make a decision on your method, if you wish to. And then to have a public comment period at the end before you make a final decision on the list. And so, just recognizing there are going to be a couple other periods for public comment, you may wish to just take committee questions at this point.
Okay.
Although we do have one person with his hand up, so I'll leave it up to you if you want to take 3 rounds of public comment, or it's totally up to you.
Well, is there any internal discussion here between our committee members that anything anybody like to comment on or questions? Okay, David, maybe we'll hear from the one public member who has their hand up right now.
Okay. Go ahead, Brett.
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Hi, okay, great, thank you. Yeah, when Delia was talking about the question that Jill had about the vinyl windows, what was the answer to that? Because I have potentially 2 houses that are on the list for that. I'm not planning in my lifetime of ever tearing them down or, adding on to them or anything like that. And when they go to my kids, I'm going to write a letter telling them I expect the same thing. But I just was wondering, because in the properties I have, some of the windows have been replaced with white vinyl just because of cost and also for, insulation purposes.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the short answer is it really depends, Brett. And I think that, if the committee in another forum wants to establish some guidelines, it can help guide that for, project by project review. Then I think that would be the forum for resolving on that. And I know it depends is not a very great answer to hear as a property owner, but it has, the answer to that question has varied throughout the years depending on who's sitting in these seats. I'll just be frank with you.
Yeah, no. I understand. I understand that. I just, my own house, we actually live on Mitchell Heights, and it was built in 1902. And it's a 2-story, and my wife wanted to keep the original windows, which we did. But because it has lath and plaster original windows, and it isn't spent in wintertime $700 to $800 a month on PG&E bills for the last 25 years.
Yeah. And okay. So appreciate those comments. And there's definitely going to be a comment period for you to weigh in when we get to your specific units.
Yeah, no, I know. All I was saying is that it's expensive, and you want to make sure that if you have tenants in there, that their PG&E bills aren't, extreme is basically what I'm getting at. That's all. No problem. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, David. Let's keep moving on, Dilo.
Okay. So tonight's review, I just wanted to sort of like reframe us in, okay, well, what are we doing tonight? What are we asking you to help us do? So for the Gateway Area Plan specifically, we have hired a consultant to prepare a list of potentially historic resources, casting a pretty wide net, using existing criteria outlined in our current general plan. The subcommittee reviewed the sites, suggested some modifications to those criteria, which you will be asked to weigh in on and adopt tonight. And the remaining sites that the subcommittee either felt should be listed or needed additional discussion from this body have been brought before you this evening. And property owners that could stand to be affected, everyone on that list has been noticed of this meeting and has the opportunity to partake if they would like to weigh in on how we are reviewing their sites. And if sites do stay on this list, that means they are going to require additional review. And if they are going to try and contest the finding, they will need to provide information to showcase that to us. And we also had a public member who is with us tonight who attended the last session and had several sites that he would like the committee to consider for additional review that were primarily sites that were removed by the subcommittee, but we decided to bring them all before you again tonight as a full body to have a discussion about whether or not you want to discuss those at your next meeting. And I think there are 6 or 7 of them. It's not, dozens and dozens of sites. So tonight, the HLC is asked to adopt the more targeted criteria that the subcommittee has suggested, and those are in your packet, and I can bring them up on the screen if that's helpful. We'll be asking you to make a formal vote on those, and then essentially apply those criteria and adopt sites as a full voting body, one site at a time. And what we're going to suggest is, for each site, basically doing a straw poll vote, getting a sense of where the committee is at, and then opening up each site individually to the property owner for public comment if they choose to provide information to the committee in advance of the committee voting. So that would be a time specifically for the property owner, not for the general public, to basically weigh in on their site. But then once the committee has gone through the full list of sites, that would be another opportunity for general public comment in advance of adopting all of those sites into the record. Does that make sense, Bill, and others? Okay. And so finally, as sort of like a separate add-on item, we're going to look at the 6 sites that were submitted by a member of the public, and we're not going to be asking you to vote on those tonight. I think we just need a simple, yes, no, we want to consider these, and then we'll agendize those for the next meeting and notice the property owners. So that is, basically the framework this evening, and I wanted to just make it clear to the committee that what we're doing tonight is specific to the Gateway survey, but it will, basically be the framework we will use hopefully citywide in the future in terms of the criteria that we're applying and the way we're trying to capture sites as potentially historic for further review. So I just wanted to add that. And David, I saw you turned your video on. Do you have something that you want to add before I move on? Nope. Okay. So I'm going to just go through the criteria really briefly. And this is the part of the meeting where we're starting to recycle content from last meeting. So, for some of you, feel free to just tune out for the next 4 to 5 minutes or follow along. So on the left-hand side of the screen is our existing adopted criteria, adopted by the City Council. And on the right hand is the modifications proposed by staff in partnership with the subcommittee. And those modifications are listed in orange, just so you can kind of see them side by side. So this first one is trying to refine this first criteria to make it tied to the 4 basically eras of significance in Arcata's, development that were identified both in Susie Van Kirk's survey and in our historic preservation element. Also in this one, tying these, representative periods more specifically back to the city's context statement and periods of social history to the city's context statement. And then this last one, we did not propose a modification. If it's of an unusual or special design character, that still remains and is open to the interpretation of the decision maker at the time that a site is being reviewed. And then in addition to those sort of criteria, we wanted to kind of tack on these additional refinements. And, Tim or Jill, if you want to speak to these, raise your hand and then I'll make sure to let you talk when I'm done talking. But the idea here is to further refine, to make sure we're really protecting sites that are, of the right time period and are relatively rare. If there are, 50 craftsmen in Arcatas, we don't necessarily need to be protecting them. but the example we had on 13th or 11th, whatever street it was a couple meetings ago with the stucco, it's an unusual style for the area, and that warranted additional review. Also, condition and integrity, similar to what Tim was speaking about before. Integrity is being defined as sort of the similarity to its original construction and its retained ability to convey its significance. So this is kind of a wooey one, but the idea is to make sure that it still is able to convey the significance from when it was originally constructed and tell the story of its history. And then, similar vein here, quality of significance. How much is it really providing us about an important period in the city's history? And these are the things we'll continue to kind of refine and explore over time. We just had a meeting today about a site that we plan to bring to the committee to ask these exact questions and see if staff is on track and how we're planning to evaluate the resource. So those are, generally speaking, the criteria that we're asking you to approve tonight. And after we get through this point, take public comment, vote on the criteria, I will run us through each site one by one. But that ends this part of my presentation.
Can I also just add to that in addition to identifying the criteria, which are sort of a little bit more refined than what we have currently in our general plan, that the committee would be using to assess the properties that we're about to review, that you would also establish a process for considering these properties, process for voting on these properties. When we did this process, it was probably about 6 years ago now for the Bayview area. And Bill, you may recall, Jill, I don't remember if you were on the committee at that time, but we had a lot of properties that we were looking at. It took several weeks. The folks that were there in the room at the time, we didn't have the same membership throughout the entire process. Folks weren't noticed that this was going on. There were a lot of problems with it. And the committee at that time decided to use just sort of like a majority vote, which is the typical, if you have a majority vote, then that leans into a yes vote. And what I saw in reviewing that list is that there was a really broad diversity of, types of resources, if you will, and I'm using air quotes around that ended up on that list. That list was never adopted, and so I guess to improve on that, we've done several things. We've made sure that we noticed all of the sites that were potentially under consideration, that were being recommended by city staff and our consultants early on, so folks got notice of this meeting. We actually doubled down in this meeting because nobody showed up to the last meeting. So we wanted to make absolutely certain that they knew about it. So we sent each individual owner a letter. So, we're trying to make sure that, that public participation piece is there. My recommendation to the committee is that you also consider a slightly more robust approach to voting these properties in. This decision has significant impact on the owner's ability to use their sites. As Dila went through the pros and cons, and as Mr. Miranda just spoke to the fact that regardless of whether you are listed or not, it's more expensive to own, operate, and maintain a structure once you've been designated historic. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you all fully understand that. And so because of that higher significance, I think, ensuring that, and also recognizing somewhat the subjectivity associated with these decisions, ensuring that the entire committee is in agreement, that you have consensus vote that the properties that you're going to recommend forward to the city council as historic resources, that you have that consensus amongst you. So I want you to consider that the fallback position is that no, we only need 3 of us to say yes. The higher standard would be, all 4 of us, or when you have a 5th member, all 5 of us have to say yes, this is a historic resource. So before you transition, I would like you to kind of discuss that and deliberate that amongst yourselves. Maybe ask some questions if you have any.
I'll start here. How about a supermajority? So we have 5 here right now, and so essentially 4 out of 5. And the reason I say that is there's.
You have 4. You have 4 members.
Oh, we have 4. Okay, so 3 out of 4, I guess. 75% or something. So, but whatever, a supermajority. I guess that is a supermajority. Majority is a majority in that sense. No matter what.
Well, you have a 5-member body. You just don't have 1 member appointed. So a supermajority would still be 4.
Still thinking Alex is with us. So well.
Yeah, a supermajority would still technically be 4 members would vote in favor. So that's another alternative.
I guess I just worry about consensus opinion because. You always could end up with one individual. I'm not saying this group here, but in future, if there's a future situation, is this? Well, that's a question. Is this a precedent for future decisions? I guess is the question here for you.
I think it could be. We are developing this process and setting up a process for the list that's going into the gateway plan specifically. So just the historic resources in the gateway planning area. But we do want to create a framework that, that is similar. We'd like to ultimately go into the rest of the city and create a similar list throughout the city. And so I do think you are creating a precedent, but I also think that, we've learned in the past from our mistakes. I think it's more than, reasonable to say that, we may make some mistakes in this process and we'll learn from those and modify. So if you say, a supermajority is what we're going to try and you wind up not happy with the outcome, then maybe the next time you try for, consensus or you ramp back down to, only 3, a majority.
For today's purposes, I think if there is a supermajority that we achieve and all 4 of us agree that this specific site is historic, I think maybe that would be enough to move on. But if 3 of 4, perhaps that comes back for further review once we have our 5th member to see if that would qualify as a supermajority. I agree with everything that's been said, and I appreciate the criteria that's been laid out. And I do agree with you that achieving consensus would be best, but consensus isn't always possible. But a supermajority, considering the potential financial costs, is certainly warranted in this situation.
In terms of process, I also did just want to note, I believe the way we framed it in the report is we recommended adoption of attachment A, which outlines the criteria as well as some kind of procedural pieces, including a unanimous vote of the full committee for approval of each site. So I just wanted to flag, if you chose to go in a different direction, we'd want to make sure we captured that, adopt attachment A with the exception of blank. So just wanted to note that as well.
Good point.
These buildings that we'll be discussing shortly were ones that our subcommittee has already been looking at, correct?
That's correct.
In addition to that, we did have a public member who submitted a list of and images, I believe, of several other buildings that they wished the committee to consider. So we'll dig into that in more detail, but it's the list. It's both those lists, the list that the subcommittee put together, and then additional sites potentially.
Well, for the reasons that Ron articulated, the costs and such, I tend to think we need to have as many people concurring on our committee as possible.
I think it should be unanimous if something's going to be put on the landmark list.
I would agree with Jill.
Yeah, I'm kind of inclined to, there's just four of us here. So this isn't like unanimous decision, shouldn't be hard to achieve, I don't think. And if we do have a disagreement in such a small group, that's probably worthy of attention, I guess. So I'd kind of go with Jill here that even though I'm a little worried about a precedent of setting everything in the future going forward towards consensus, especially if the group grows a lot larger, for the purpose of this meeting, it's fine.
And I'm definitely okay with that. I think the importance of the decision I'd be fine with having consensus be the bar for today.
Yeah, and I think you could, certainly evaluate it. The council is doing interviews for a new HLC member either at the next meeting or the following, and so you'll have your fifth member, and you'll be able to have that to reflect on the experience that you have now.
Well, I'm wondering, it sounds like the committee has, done some deliberation on this. Do we want to now offer an opportunity for public comment before we take a vote?
And for clarification, that comment is on our criteria that you've spent some time outlining, Dilo, and our vote is to approve those basically four criteria with some a set of other considerations: age, condition, distinguishing characteristics, quality of significance.
Exactly, yeah. And basically, it would be making a motion to adopt attachment A of your staff report, which outlines all of those things, and that's packet pages 6 and 7.
Well, if the rest of the committee is ready, I think we should open this to public comment. And in the event we have lots of hands here, we should allow a limited time for public comment. A couple of minutes. I'm not sure what level of public are attending right now.
We have 6 people.
We have 6.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe those 6 people can be respectful of the committee in that time, and then afterwards we'll close public comment. We'll come back to a committee and for more discussion and seeking motion.
Okay, so I'll time for you, Chair. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on the methodology at this point? I'm not seeing any.
Oh, well, we certainly appreciate the public attending.
Someone just
I'm sorry,
popped
Chair,
up
we
with
do
their
have
hand.
one.
Well, we appreciate your attendance and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Hi, this is sorry, Patricia has to mute. This is James Beck. I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not, and you let me know quickly. It was just a comment on the vinyl windows, because I was walking through the community recently and just realizing that's a little bit of a struggle sometimes just to maintain preservation with structures. And my one thought, since I have worked in construction for a lot of years, is just possibly allowing that when necessary to preserve the structures in the way of maybe just if the jambs are in good shape to allow for inserts, possibly either sash inserts or possibly, if it works out, just the little vinyl windows without the fins for a solution that could be reversed at a later time. And if money isn't as much of an issue, I've noticed on a recent restoration, they used Marvin fiberglass windows, which seem very resembling to the older style wood windows. But once again, they're kind of costly. And I apologize if this wasn't the right time for that, but I just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, I just had a really quick question. We registered our house is already registered historic. So it's mainly out of curiosity for others. If somebody wanted at a later date to approach the city and register their home historic, and they're not on this list now, and they really feel that they have significant historic, qualifications, or their home does, could they still apply to be registered historic at a later date? So that was just a question. Or is this the final draft of what's considered of importance? And then and so anyways, that was my question. Thanks.
Do you mind, Chair, if I give a crack at that?
I think it's a great question.
I suppose you want to answer it. I guess I should ask first.
I think we do answer, and both questions, whether that's now or after any other comments. Are there any more public?
No other comments.
Well, I think we ought to, dabble in both realms. I think the windows is a good question and on a lot of people's minds. And yeah, David, so your help on this would be great.
Okay, well, maybe I'll leave it to the committee to talk about windows. I think that, Jim has made a good point, and I think that I've heard this particular composition of members, follow that same line of thinking that to, preserve the resource overall when the owner doesn't have the ability to, to replace with more expensive windows is more important than having the exact design of the original windows.
Well, I think Jill and Tim
generally
have good thoughts on this. But I would just start off by saying the idea that it's a case-by-case analysis is an important one to consider. And also, can't vinyl windows be the idea that the additions of vinyl can be removed and wood windows brought back is something to think about. And then, the idea also that the windows on a particular building, there may be a difference between windows that face public view sheds versus windows that are in the backyard where the public's not seeing. And those are the things that I kind of think about.
I kind of agree. I think that, big points you made there, and I think David said the same thing, is why we wouldn't allow, our goal is not to allow neglect of a structure just because somebody can't make a repair or an improvement. And it's going to have to always be a case-by-case basis, is my perspective. I think, like you were saying, David, for assurances that, whatever was put in didn't detract, and that as well, Bill. So I think, it's I think if there's an obvious need and the goals are worthwhile, and the type of window frame being put in seems to work and fit within the context of that structure, I think our committee would consider that and probably approve. But obviously, it depends on the situation. So,
I'd like to make a comment. My personal opinion is, as long as the fenestration stays similar, I would never want someone to put a horizontal window in a spot where a vertical window was. I've never wanted to tell people that they can't be efficient in how they take care of their old building. So I've never had a problem with people replacing unlike kind windows in properties, knowing always that at a later date a wood reproduction could replace that vinyl window. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and then just super briefly on the other question, because I know we got to get onto the content. I think that the intent behind this effort is to capture the historic resources that the committee feels are, highest priority for preservation. And if someone came forward at a later date and had something that didn't make this list because perhaps it didn't have quite the integrity and was willing to make those improvements and list that structure, I do think that we consider those on a case-by-case basis.
I would even say, perspectives on importance of styles shifts over time. So, we set the rules now, but 50 years from now, there may be a different perspective on different time periods too. So I think there's always, these lists will always shift and change over time just based on this time. So.
No, there's the rub. We also
I do want to note. Yeah, I do want to note that there's another person with their hand up, but you've kind of closed the comment period on this piece, Chair. If you want to open it again, or if you want to move on to the material.
Well, I appreciate the public participating and being willing to comment. I'd be willing to open this up if this particular attendee can be respectful of our time and the material we're trying to get through. So I would like to open up to this comment.
Okay, great. Welcome,
okay,
Ida.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi, I just had a question that wasn't really, I guess, that I didn't really find an answer for yet. I am a tenant in one of the commercial buildings on the list, and we have sort of a giant parking lot, front and center, which is not in line with the gateway plan. If that building was added to the historic list, would that affect our ability to do something like put in permanent, outdoor seating for a restaurant there, or put in, landscaping in what right now is just a giant, lots of asphalt?
No, generally not. Yeah, and you can reach out to us, Ida, either Dilo or myself, outside of this meeting format, and we can talk with you in more detail about your plans.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, Dilo, you're up, right?
Well, the committee, if you are ready, willing, and able, it's now time to basically have a member of the committee make a motion to adopt, the evaluation strategy outlined in this attachment, or propose any modifications to it before we get into the meat and potatoes of discussing the sites.
I'll move.
Thank you, Dilo.
Okay, we got a motion by Vice Chair McDonald. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay.
Ron thirds. So.
Excellent. Okay, and so we're going to just do a roll call vote here. So Chair Rich?
Well, I'm assuming the motion is to accept as written.
That's correct.
No change. Oh, yeah. I agree with that. Yes.
Okay. Committee Member Keith?
I approve.
Okay. Committee Member Perry?
I approve as well.
Okay. And Vice Chair McDonald?
Yes.
Great. Well, that's actually a really significant moment in the history of this committee. So congratulations to everyone. Okay. So,
and thanks to the subcommittee for working on this, you guys.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Jill did all the hard. Guarantee you there.
It was actually pretty painless, which was great. And yeah, we definitely appreciate the expertise every committee member brings to this process. So can you guys see a big orange screen? Great. Okay, so to business. This is this is all material we presented last time. We chose to wait to make official determinations on this until we had the full committee and determined, how many people we needed to vote each property into the record. So there are about 20 sites, and I've grouped them into 3 groups. As you'll see, about half of them were already identified by Susie Van Kirk, but have not voluntarily chosen to become landmarked properties. And if a property was identified in the survey that is currently a landmark, we did not include it on this list. So I went through this already, so I'm not going to really dwell on this, but I just want to remind the committee that your decision tonight to recommend properties on the list is not, making a legal modification. This is a recommendation to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission makes the recommendation to the City Council. They're the ones who make the ultimate policy decision in order to make the determination for how these sites will be adopted into the Gateway Area Plan. So the first set I titled Special Cases. We got 3 in this one. I recommend we, I won't make a recommendation actually, but we could either adopt all 3 at once or go through them individually. Some of the members of the public who commented today own the property, the 4th property in this series, and that one is landmarked. But these 3 are not yet. They were identified by Susie Van Kirk, and as Alex mentioned at our last committee meeting, these are sometimes referred to as Arcata's first subdivision by, I believe, Thomas Devlin. So any comments by the committee?
I would suggest maybe instead of going through comments that you just take a straw poll. Because if you're in unanimity without having any kind of conversation, you're probably going to get through the list a little quicker. And I think there are certain of these that you're probably all going to say, yep, that's historic.
So can you run us through, David, just for me as like the poll taker? How do we run a straw poll? Do I just go through and basically like a roll call vote?
Well, yeah, I think a quick roll call vote or show of hands. I guess, Jill, maybe you don't have access to a camera right now. And one other addition that I would suggest that you add to this is that if the owner of the property is here and would like to speak, that you allow them to speak before you take your straw poll.
Jill, are you able to raise your Zoom hand by chance?
I don't know. Let's see.
Okay.
You could just do a quick voice vote. Wow, my tongue is really
exactly.
twisted
I'll
today.
just say, I say yes to all these. I put them all on the list. So it's like, I'm a yes.
Yeah, that was my question going into this. Perhaps things can be streamlined a little bit because these particular buildings are ones that our subcommittee have all been looking at. And
yeah, exactly. And how many, sorry, Bill, to interrupt, but Dilo, how many did we go through?
About 60.
Yeah. So, I mean, we narrowed it down to 20.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, this should be a no-brainer.
So maybe Chair and Committee Member Perry can indicate their agreement to that, and then if Tim or Jill, if you have second thoughts, then you can indicate. But otherwise, we'll just check in with the 2. Yep. Open it up for public comment if the owner is in the attendance and they wanted to speak, and then you can get through those pretty quickly.
Okay, well, for this one, I feel like we're all feeling pretty confident. I don't believe any of the owners are in attendance, but David, are you able to see the participant list? Because I'm not.
I can't. Yeah, I can. No one has their hand up.
Okay. So go ahead.
I'd like just to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
Are there any pending permits for any of these buildings? Trying to seek, is there any controversy with any of these?
Not that I know of.
Pending action? Okay.
Nope. I mean, sometimes, if things don't get routed to us, if they're interior improvements or whatever, but nothing has, come across my desk for any of the sites we're reviewing tonight, actually, I don't think.
Which is another good point for the committee. Am I correct in thinking interior improvements are almost in a separate category?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking exterior modifications.
Yep, great.
With the one caveat that if there's an interior modification that affects the exterior, the views from the exterior, that those could potentially be affected as well. Most of these will not have that kind of situation, but just wanted to throw out that caveat.
Okay. Well, moving on to this next one, we're just kind of like breaking this beautiful process we just made, because these were sites that the subcommittee didn't necessarily think needed to be on the list, but wanted to check in because of their connection with Haliashi and wanted to get, overall the weigh in of the committee. So Tim and Jill, are you, still feeling confident moving these forward, or do you want to note anything?
I would like some input from the committee. I think we put these on the list because, because of association.
Mm-hmm.
The association with the Haliashi business, is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is in and of itself not necessarily historic, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we had a little debate about the Purple House, mostly about, where it came from. Did it always sit there and such? And I think Alex kind of presented some information at our last meeting about some of the background of this. And I think, these are just kind of small, unusual structures existing within the district, and, they're worthy of attention. So.
I think that these are examples of buildings that are of not always obvious, but of equal importance to the larger, more ornate, more obvious buildings that we might all raise our hands to. I think it's important to remember the small buildings and the ones you might not even see going quickly by. They all have stories and associations and history that at this time in our writing history, at this time, these buildings may illuminate some history that we haven't heard yet about those people, the more common buildings. So, I appreciate seeing these types of buildings on our list and receiving consideration. I particularly like the little yellow building and those windows. That might be an example where a change of those windows out to vinyl, maybe it's those 4-pane divided, or is that 5, upper area of those windows is character defining. And so I would, without knowing more, I think I would support our committee, our subcommittee, that you've all looked at these and deliberated on these and placed them on our list. And I would say yes. If our subcommittee feels strong about that and also agrees, I support.
Ron, what's your general?
Yeah, I'm going to trust the committee on this one. I agree with the comment about the windows and the yellow. I've been in both of those buildings, and they are unique for sure. So it's funny because I think of the yellow house as connected to the recycling center, not necessarily the Haliashi all the time, because I remember being in there for that. So yeah, I think that these are certainly unique structures to consider.
Okay, great.
Just for a little background, I think the yellow house was moved to that location sometime in the 50s, and the pink house was, I believe, built at that location sometime in the 40s. Shows up in the 48 aerial.
And I believe David has spoken to the main property owner for the site, and at that time no concerns were voiced. Is there anyone in the audience who represents the property owner? Okay, well then we're going to move on from this one as well. So this is the last sort of oddball site, and as Tim has mentioned, this one has actually already been identified as historic by Caltrans. I don't think there's really any need to dwell on this one unless the committee has any comments about it that they'd like to offer.
Well, I would say something. This is one of my favorite things about Arcata. is the invisible railroad that goes through. And I will often stop and park in places I know the railroad went right through the car, and ask my children if they feel or sense anything different about parking here. And they, of course, always say no. And then I imagine us getting clobbered by a train because we're parking on the railroad tracks. And I especially like crossing the railroad tracks on Samoa Boulevard, where we have to slow down. There's two obvious big bumps in the road. You know, I can imagine someday we're going to say we're paving that all over so people can go more quickly through there. And I think it's a reminder. This is a reminder of a different era of Arcata. And, you know, also to remind the committee that at one point we had quite a bit of discussion about an interpretive panel for the railroad station here, not far from this photograph. And I really appreciate you, the subcommittee, bringing this linear feature to light. And I hope that the city can find ways to interpret that history and even keep a little bit of it around, whether it's making us drive over those bumps or just keeping a couple signs around or a couple lights. I think this is a good one. It's a resource type that I physically feel when I'm passing through town, and I like that part.
Yeah.
And I concur. As somebody who grew up here and heard the trains running, it's a reminder of the industry that once was and the industry and what happened in the past. And it's an easy one because it's visible and visceral.
Yeah, to this point, I think, you know, like Dilo said, the Caltrans has already identified this, and so it's kind of a moot point in some ways. I'm glad to hear the support from the committee, and also recognizing that, you know, several of these sites will be repurposed, you know, as this plan develops, as the area develops. And so I think, you know, when we get into the environmental analysis, it'll be important to, you know, have the committee weigh in on the appropriate kinds of mitigations, the interpretive signs, where those locations, where the important locations would be to retain, or which areas are, you know, acceptable to, you know, to convert to other uses. I think that, you know, we'll likely come back and have a broader discussion on that piece with you as we get closer to the environmental analysis.
Okay. Well, moving on to the second set, and I think these ones will actually go pretty fast. I don't want to jinx anything, but these are all sites that both the subcommittee recommended and were identified by Susie Van Kirk, have a fair amount of research. So I think these will go pretty fast. And Bill and Ron, I'll be looking mostly to the two of you to indicate your support. So the first one is Portuguese Hall. Looks like a thumbs up. Ron, do you have any comments about this one? Okay, that's a yes. Second one is the Miranda House. I do know we have the property owner in the audience with us today. I spoke with him earlier. He said it was his grandmother's house, and over his dead body is it being redeveloped. So I think we're good to go on that one. But would the property owner like to speak before we move on from this site? David, are you able to see?
Welcome back, Brett.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you. That's all. I'm fine with it. I get it, you know, and it sounds like, you know, eventually if there's issues or, you know, remodels or things that need to be done, we'll just have to work together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, it's a fantastic building, by the way. Really appreciate the adaptive reuse.
Yeah, it was actually my great-grandmother's. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ron and Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Show of thumbs? Yes. Okay, excellent. Lumberyard office. So this, as currently brought forward, is just the small office on the intersection, not the larger storage structure workshop behind it. David, any property owner interest in this one?
I don't think so. Let's see, Brett, you've got your hand up still. Did you have your hand up still, or did you put it up again?
No, I'm sorry. The last time you guys lowered my hand, so I'll do
okay.
it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll do that. Thanks.
Okay, it looks like Ron was making a thumbs up. Bill, how do you feel about this one? Is that a thumbs up? Okay, you're blurred out. Okay, great. Okay, Lord House. This one, I think David has had some correspondence with the property owner. And the interesting thing about this one is, there has already been a fair amount of recognition of the historic nature of this site in the past as well. So we're kind of recovering old ground with this one. David, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that the property owner is very opposed to the site being listed, was very opposed to it being considered potentially historic when they came in for a design review project previously. We did alert them to this meeting, and certainly if this gets voted up and gets moved on to the next stage, we'll alert them to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Bill and Ron?
I personally love this place. I think it's always been someplace I've always considered unique.
I respect the feelings of the owners greatly, but it does not preclude what they own to be historically significant. I think this building would fall in line with other buildings of its similar age and architecture in town, and it is what it is, and that's where I'm at with it. Is even though we designate it tonight or we don't designate it tonight, it doesn't change the building's integrity, its association, its architectural characteristics. And so perhaps by designating tonight, the owners would realize at some point in the future that we've saved a step down the road. I understand what the owners are saying, but my position is to say yes.
Okay, Ron, and
Thanks.
It sounds like you're
Ron,
in agreement.
Yeah, Ron
okay.
said yes.
Okay, so we're on to the final set of sites here. This one is an interesting little guy. I don't remember if this was one of the sites that the subcommittee wanted to elevate for further discussion or if it was generally supported, but I think it already has seen some pretty significant alterations, but there is something sort of special about it as well. So I don't know, Tim or Jill, if you wanted to add anything.
I think this is one that, Jill and I did not agree on each one. And I think we took a couple we sort of like, well, we'll just kind of bring this to the larger group and we'll consider this as a group. And I think that's my memory of it, Jill, correct?
That's my recollection too. Yeah, there was some disagreement on this one.
And I'm also happy to bring up Street View if that's helpful to kind of see other angles of this site.
Well, I wonder what the difference of opinion was, Tim. Do you remember any of that?
Oh, Jesus, talking months ago now. I think, well, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe for myself, I thought this retained characteristics of, it's retained characteristics of its original style here pretty well. It doesn't look special really necessarily. But that made me go. I was kind of on the fence of saying just crossing it off the list, I guess is where I would have been. I'm not sure if Jill's can speak or not. I'm sure she has an opinion on this.
Yeah, Jill, are you with us or have you stepped away for a moment?
But I guess
did someone want me to?
Well, what was your perspective on this, Jill? This is one I think we're kind of like, I don't know, maybe not. And you were saying no, and I was saying maybe yes. And And so, what is your perspective, I guess? Mine was, I felt this kind of, still has, characteristics of its original, I guess, look. And got a different view.
This was your baby. I mean, I don't really have, I don't really understand why it's on the list.
Yeah, and I think that's why we were just going to take it to the group and let it have a debate here to discuss.
Yeah. So
we didn't want to have a grand debate.
Yeah, I say we bump it off.
I see a line in there that concerns me is that it was two separate houses to begin with, or two separate structures, and then might have been placed together.
Yeah, if you look at it from looking north on the side, it has kind of like a roof pitch like this. A lot of different little structures squished together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about the little purple building where we have, what's the rationale between keeping the little purple building and not this?
Well, I think it's kind of this was two separate structures previously. I think is kind of the key thing.
I understand.
So I'm willing to back off on this. I just wanted to get it to the larger group to have a discussion is all. I think it was really where I was going. The other ones we crossed off the list usually had some pretty significant issues. This one was, it's nothing. It's in terms of looks, it doesn't look great. But I was like, let's let the whole group discuss. So
I think the other piece to this that, if you go back to sort of the principles that you use for your methodology, I'm not sure that this would qualify. And I totally get where you're coming from, Bill. I mean, I think what I'm hearing the chair say is, let's not just look at the Victorians. We want to look at the vernacular as well. And I think there are examples of that. But, does this, I feel like, this style of building is nearly ubiquitous. And so, in terms of the is this an exemplary representation of this type that needs to be on the list? Or if we're going to set our sights at this level, do we wind up casting such a wide net that, nearly any structure in this, built in this period is going to be on the list as well?
One additional note is that the little purple house also, the subcommittee had a consideration of association as well with a local business. So I think that was the other piece in their consideration.
Yeah, I think we agreed at the beginning of this process here that we have consensus. I've had more time to consider all the properties we've been looking at over the last 4 or 5 months. So I'm inclined to vote no now, essentially, is what I'm saying here. So.
And Jill's vote was a no vote?
It was a no.
Well, I think for me, in this case, I support the subcommittee and your breadth of analysis on many buildings and your decision based on that. And so for me, I support our subcommittee's decision with a no vote.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Although a great little building, I would say. It sure is a cutie.
It is very dear. Okay, so this one's on G Street, right when you're coming into town. One of the first, historic buildings you see on your left when you're coming off Samoa. It also may have been two structures. I'm not sure, but I don't think the subcommittee had any differences of opinion about adding this one. As far as
I vote yes.
Ron, you feeling?
Yeah, I like it. This seems to fit the criteria as written.
Okay.
Yeah, I look at this and I look at if there's some minor improvements, basically to this property, it probably look pretty good. It just needs some love and care, basically. It seems like to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then for this one, and I think there are just a couple more left. This one, I think, the subcommittee was a little bit unsure about the windows, but as Jill said, the fenestration is relatively similar to the original.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Bill, I feel like you're making a yes face. Okay.
I want to point out on this one, this was the home that when we had our first meeting on the Gateway Area Plan, and we talked about historic resources, I believe this is the home that, Tim, you had made some points about some of the modifications that had happened over time and that you didn't think it necessarily fit the criteria anymore. Dilo, on this one in particular, can you, because this is a real poor view of the overall site, can you go ahead and bring up the street view so we can just get views of the rest of the structure?
Sure, yeah. And I think what, if I'm remembering that conversation, I think Tim had indicated, this structure likely would not qualify for the National Register if that's the threshold we're going toward. But there were definitely, elements of it that, were still had a fair amount of integrity and could potentially, if we were going the route of considering contributory structures, that would be, maybe the most appropriate for this. But
rambling kind of look on the street side, as I think, and obviously we're not looking for National Register status here. That's not the goal here. So
true.
Okay, I almost just accidentally left the webinar, but we're all good here. I'm out. Okay, so just sort of satellite. This is where in the district it falls, kind of at the western edge. And so this is, the front view, but as David was discussing, there's definitely kind of a ramblingness to the rear. Some interesting wooden windows. Definitely kind of a lot going on with this one. So does this raise any new comments for the subcommittee?
Not for me, because it appears from these images that there have been decisions made here in the past to construct additions. But correct me if I'm wrong, these additions to the left moved, and the original form of that old house could be realized and brought to its glory. And that those additions, although I agree, rambling and perhaps not of like shape and pitch, and just for sure windows, it doesn't preclude the ability for that building to stand alone again someday. Probably won't ever, but if we're going to hold to our discussion.
You can also tell which the original structure was very distinctly from the additions.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, really, this particular addition follows the Secretary of Interior standards pretty nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Jill, too, is like, considering what we're, the guidelines for improvements, this is actually a good example of how how improvements would be put in place in some sense. So.
Yeah,
I would vote nice.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Dilo. I was voting as a yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I was just going to say it is nice when the average, person is able to really suss that out. Okay. Can you guys see my PowerPoint still?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So this one is associated with the railroad, I believe. It was along the rail line and is relatively unusual, I guess I would say, for the area. It definitely is old and cool.
And gets a yes vote for me.
Okay. So I know we do have the property owner here for this one as well. Tim and Jill had kind of an interesting conversation about this one and the value of it actually being two structures, basically melded together, and that in itself kind of showcasing a certain, narrative of our local history. And there was some dialogue about, whether or not to list this one as opposed to some of the others in this block. But this one, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, was determined to just have the highest integrity and the best ability to kind of convey its significance, as we've discussed. David, do you know if the property owner would like to speak on this one?
I'm not seeing any hands. Do you want to speak on this one as well? Okay, there we go. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. When my great grandmother got this house, at least what I heard from my father when he was alive was it was as it was now. As far as that back 2-story was added before I think my great grandmother even bought this property. So yeah, I'm sure originally it was just the front part of the house, and then I think it was Alex or whoever talked about it at your last meeting, which I reviewed. I wasn't present, but she basically said how families save their money and eventually add on later. So anyway, my plan is to hopefully keep it as original as possible. And it's just a one residence. They also said it was a duplex, and it's not. It's a one residence.
Interesting. It does look kind of like a duplex.
It does, but it's not. You're welcome.
Okay, I saw a thumbs up from Bill. Ron, that's a thumbs up from you as well. Okay, I think we have just 2 sites left to go. So this was, I believe, associated with the lumber mill that was at this site. There is a historic report, I believe, from Ray Hillman associated with this site as well.
And didn't Alex tell us there was a plan to move this building?
Yes, that's correct.
And would designation preclude that ability to do that? Or force them through EIR?
I think this will be coming before you as a separate agenda item in probably the relative near future. This project site has never, to my knowledge, been formally designated, but when there was a project on the subject site previously, it was essentially treated as though it was historic. So the city never made a formal decision about it, but it was treated as such. If the site is historic, if the building is historic, then I think to answer your second question, Bill, and what the discussion will be around when the item comes forward is, do the site conditions have a relationship between that structure's ability to convey its sense of history, or is the site so modified at this point that the structure itself is what conveys its sense of history? In which case, the structure could be moved without an EIR, because that moving the structure is what would preserve it. In particular, because if the EIR route is pursued, probably what the EIR would be for is just demolition. So I think those two issues are separate. If it's historic, then there's some other questions you need to answer. If it's not historic, then you don't need to answer those questions. In either case, the applicant's going to come back later, or the property owner's going to come back later with an application to move it.
And what we're looking at is what's in this photo, because I know that extends to the left, and what we're deciding on is just this front piece on the 45 on the corner.
Yeah, the portion to the left has actually already been demolished.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was never considered historic. That was an add-on additional later.
paraphrase what you're saying, David, the context of the environment the structure is in plays a part in terms of whether movement is would be a significant impact or not in some sense.
And integrity of association is already compromised.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that, again, I am not the expert. You all are. I glean as much as I possibly can from from the various members of the year, but that's definitely my understanding. Yeah.
Well, that kind of makes sense because obviously, the environment is nothing like when the structure was used as part of a lumber mill anymore. So I don't know if you could even tell there was a lumber mill there, unless you knew the history. So.
For my vote, I agree. This building is historical, and if the subcommittee was unanimous on this building, I will support our subcommittee with a yes vote.
I would too. I've always thought of this as a kind of a cornerstone in our community when it was Copeland Lumber and so forth. It's on the site that was once housed the original Arcata High School, so it must have come on after that. But it's always been part of the landscape that was told a story of the lumber, the mills, and the lumber that was sold here in Arcata. So I'm eager to see if there's a good spot for it to land to continue to convey that message. I know that's the concern I have.
But it does sound like for the purposes of this evening's discussion, we have a full vote. Yes. Okay, I think this is the last one. So the Cooper building, we definitely, I feel like of all the sites, this is the one as a full committee we've had the most discussion about. I know Alex, when she was still in the committee, said, yes, I feel like it does definitely convey a certain era. That being said, it is somewhat unusual in that it is outside of the 4 eras that we are typically setting ourselves up to adhere to. I have coordinated a little bit with this property owner. To date, he's given no indication of any concern with it being considered a potentially historic resource. And I'm not sure if he's here with us tonight. I don't remember seeing him in the audience.
When I look at this building, I think of Arcata Fire Station, Bank of America. And I don't discredit some of that kind of architecture. I think it presents a fun story in the change of perceptions at that time. And our committee, both Jill and Tim, you felt this one was worthy?
Well, Jill had some interesting comments on this. Jill, why don't you go ahead? I saw you just went off.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what I said.
I feel like I remember basically you saying, Jill, like, this is a pretty nice example. Like it has some detail.
I like this building a lot. I think it's a beautiful example of early modern architecture. Where fenestration really, large openings, large glass openings are something that we take for granted now, but initially it was pretty spectacular.
I think Alex also talked about there's kind of a social history aspect too involved with the structure, didn't she? Wasn't she talking about this is all artist studios upstairs at one point for quite a long time?
Yeah, I had forgotten about that piece of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm all in, especially if we can bring some hubcaps back to the scene there.
No promises.
Well, I really appreciate Jill's comments, and I agree that it does represent that early modernist era. My only concern was that it didn't fit one of the identified architectural areas that we had in part number 1. And so to Delo's comment earlier, we may need to start considering those or mid-century modern in the future as additional elements that we may be looking for within the in our community to make sure that the best examples are preserved.
Agreed, Ron.
David, you're making a face.
I think I'm going to hold my comments, but I think we'll definitely need to bring. I was going to sort of entertain a conversation around whether you wanted to modify the list of eras in our original criteria, but I think we can bring that back around as we get to the historic resources element of the general plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that there's actually quite a bit that we need to discuss about that mid-century modern. I totally don't disagree with it, but I think it's a really meaty subject that the committee's going to want to spend some time on. And we have at least five of the members, five of the members, I think, in the audience who are interested in the very next topic on your agenda. So I don't want to sidetrack us too much.
Okay, well, we did it. Ta-da! So I believe we wanted to retain. Remind me if I'm wrong about this, David, but I believe this was the second opportunity for comment. Now that we've gone through every site, we're going to formally adopt the list that we agreed upon and provide an opportunity for comment to the public before we formally make that action. Is that correct?
Yeah, with one quick caveat. So in your packet, you did have a additional sites. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dilo. There were additional sites that were submitted by a public member that they wished you to consider those sites as well. Many of those sites, and Dilo, I think, has the exact number of buildings that were actually included in the original list that the subcommittee had considered. And so before we move on, I just wanted to give voice to, that public member's input into this process. And I don't know if the committee wants to go through those individually at this point, but wanted to make sure that you had taken the time to consider whether you wanted to have a conversation around those additional sites and what process that you wanted to have moving forward with those before taking your action on the list that was presented previously.
I don't know about you guys, but we're almost 2 hours into this and we have the heady part to come to. I would prefer to look at whatever's being presented to us with fresh eyes and maybe preview them prior to even talking publicly about them.
So your suggestion is to bring that additional list back and maybe consider them later?
That would be my preference.
Okay. And and again, recognizing the subcommittee did review the majority of those structures and decide that they weren't, that they shouldn't move forward. But it's good because you're getting a second chance at them. So any other thoughts on that idea?
I support Jill.
Okay, we'll bring it back again.
Okay, so yeah, thanks everyone for your stamina here. I appreciate Jill's comments. So I guess the only remaining item on this part of the agenda is to formally, take public comment and then formally adopt this list as presented with the exception of 545 I Street, which was voted to be removed from the list.
Do we have a motion?
I would motion to approve the list as agreed upon.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Chair Rich.
Aye.
Okay. Committee Member Perry.
Aye.
Committee Member Keith. I think that was an aye.
And I'm an aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Everyone's an aye. Thank you. I believe this finalizes the discussion on this topic.
Okay. Ready to move on, Chair?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, we have Moonlight, and I believe she's probably going to point out that we didn't take public comment a second time. I think we just talked about that.
Well, we always appreciate Moonlight's participation and what she has to say, so I'm glad to see her here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I just, I wasn't going to say anything about that. Thank you very much. Please indulge me for a couple of minutes. I just wanted to further the acknowledgement of what quality work I've just witnessed. And I have Susie Van Kirk's picture on one of my other devices, and she's smiling bright and cheery. And I just wanted to appreciate a few comments and just the fact that you've increased transparency and reliability as the intention for interested people modifying the property. And I just also want to acknowledge, thank you to this hard work the subcommittee has been doing on this. Tim, thank you for acknowledging the integrity as a key word. Dilo, I appreciated the scenario exploration that you provided in your wonderful PowerPoint. Bill, your comments about parking with your kids in front of the railroad tracks moved me almost to tears, how lovely of an image that was. And I really appreciated that, and that you physically feel something. You ask your kids to physically feel something, or if they do, I will be doing that as a habit from this point on. Ron, thank you for commenting on the visible and visceral part of the train tracks, and that you recall hearing them during when you were younger. That was a wonderful comment that you made. I appreciate you sharing that. And then let's see, Bill, I appreciated your comments about the Lord House and respecting the owner about that, and about the acknowledging the importance of small buildings. They might not seem important at this time, but they will illuminate history that we haven't heard of yet as a possibility in the future. David, thank you for encouraging the committee to review the entire structure on the White House on 10th Street. That really helped. With that moment of process. And then I'm going to, Jill, and I haven't said any of your quotes, but your sticks and carrots are always a good one in my brain. And then the last one was, I wanted to say that Dilo, I like what you said. You appreciate the expertise that every community member brings to this process. And I'll finish my comments with that comment. I've written it down. It's my new favorite quote. And thank you very much for this, what I find momentous moment in this process. And I know it's a long journey. I commend each and every one of you, and Alex as well. And, previous members who have participated on the Historic Landmarks Committee. And again, I've been staring at Susie's picture the whole time. So thank you so much for indulging me with those comments.
Thanks, Moonlight.
Yeah, thank you, Moonlight. Good to have a good vibe moment of appreciating the good vibe.
Uh-oh.
I never like to hear uh-oh.
I was trying to move Moonlight back into the attendees box. I don't think I can do that. So I'm Moonlight, I can't move you into the attendees box, so you're stuck with us. Okay. Chair, are you ready to go to the next item?
I am. Thank you, David. Thank you. Let's do it.
Okay. I want to respect everyone's time. I also want to recognize that you may not be able to get through all this material today. And in both those efforts, I will be very, very succinct. And so I've been trying to be consistent with my presentation on this matter. I'm going to breeze through some of this, just put this all up here. The point of this slide is to show you that we're basically reviewing the gateway plan with all of the committees and the Planning Commission concurrently. The idea is to, within 3 months of our start date, which was about a month ago, to be able to collate all the comments, bring that to the City Council, have the City Council review those and take action. Their action is going to essentially be, yes, we want these modifications, but we don't want those modifications. There will likely be a second pass before These are finalized and turned into the project description for this massive project that we're going through, this massive planning project we're going through, where any of the committees and the Planning Commission will be able to review and make a final recommendation on what the council adopted. I'm telling you that in order to prime you for what we're going to do with these changes. It's important for you to know what happens with your comments. For comments that are either affirming the existing policy, that they lift up that existing policy, or they're non-policy changes. They're just, grammatical or restructuring and that sort of thing. You're going to see those kinds of changes in line. So here's an example where the Planning Commission said they wanted to see this additional information put into this GM3C policy. We're going to identify the source by color coding. Green is now the Planning Commission. Maybe, Historic Landmarks Committee will be orange. For policy recommendations that conflict, that we have conflicting recommendations from different committees, or we have conflicting recommendations with the policy body that's already in the general plan, you're going to see those listed in a table. So it'll look something like this, where you have the element, for example, the gateway element. The topic might be building height. We've had some people say limit to 3, some said 4, some said 6. You're going to see where that source is, and then staff will flesh out some policy implications if the city council chose that over the others. So you're going to see some sort of framework like this for the city council to be able to walk through these different recommendations they're getting from different places and choose amongst these competing recommendations. All of the direction that we get from the city council will ultimately be incorporated into finalized documents that go then through the environmental review process and then ultimately can be adopted. Timeline that we're looking at is, over the course of the next several months, next 3 to 4 months, where we'd like to be under environmental review. And so that means we've gone through the process of the 2 rounds from recommendation to city council back to the committees if they want to see them, and a final recommendation. And then moving forward from there, the environmental review process has a timeline that it has to go through, and we anticipate being able to make some final decisions, in the spring of next year. There's no pressure to make formal recommendations at this meeting. You can continue this meeting to another meeting. You can form a subcommittee. You can have a special meeting if you want to finalize your recommendations. But to assist you in making that discussion, and luckily the Historic Resources chapter is relatively small with very few policies, Stilo has sent out this table. The table includes, in this green box, and all of you should have seen this already, the general comments that came out of your last discussion on this topic, and then each of the policies that's in the Historic Resources chapter. Now, the ask was for you to make comments on these and then supply them back to us so that we could convey to the committee in this meeting what it was that each of you said so that you'd have a place to start from. I think not all of you had the opportunity to do that. So what I'd like to do to kick off the discussion is maybe just ask if there is something in these general comments that anyone would like to revisit and maybe put forward as, hey, yeah, we want to continue these as a formal recommendation. And then going into the policy itself and seeing, if there are specific policies that folks want to talk about, does this policy fully address what we need for historic resources in the gateway? Are there improvements that we can make to these policies, or are there new policies that we need to have? I will say in closing that the intent here is not to wordsmith. We're not going to create policy on the fly. Instead, it's for you all to give staff a good sense of what you think those changes should be, and then we'll go back around and come back with changes. Unless they're really straightforward, then we'll just incorporate them into the document. So that's my staff presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I would suggest you open public comment, hear from the public, their ideas and thoughts on historic resources, enter your deliberations as you wish to, and continue the meeting if you'd like, or formalize a recommendation tonight.
Well, it's right to open this to public comment at this time, but we do so under the condition that our commenters are respectful of our committee and the time we're spending here, and all of us personally. So we appreciate the public participating, and it strengthens us as a committee when you do come. And so if there's any hands, David will see that, and now will be the time.
Okay, and I'll do the 3-minute time or 2-minute timer again, Chair. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, sorry, just one moment. I'll be with you. I was just wondering at this point if the Creamery District might be considered for a specific district within the Gateway, if that's been thought about at all, since it does have historical significance on its own. And that's my primary question. And the secondary question, since it does carry over to the Devlin Cottage neighborhood, I hope I'm not getting too much background noise, if that could be considered within the purview of historic landmark to consider things like solar shadowing. It's been a concern there's going to be potentially quite a few large structures in the area. And if it is within your purview of discussion, I was just wondering if that's something that could be considered, just so that can be, possibly clarified. And I'll keep it brief because I know you have a lot to talk about tonight. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, Chris Richards here. Thanks for all the hard work you guys are doing on this leg of it. I had a comment that ties a little bit back with the previous segment regarding your comment on the railroad and your very unique ability with your story with the children in the car and imagining history and all of that. And there's been a lot of talk in the community with that L Street corridor, or whatever we're calling it at this point, and the historic relevance of that area. I know the railroad folks have a dream, a vision of somehow creating some kind of small railway system for tourism and other things that could maybe incorporate some of the old history that's in that area, and it could become quite a unique thing. And it ties together with a lot of commentary and opinions that community members have shown in other committees about maintaining that street, not going with a new truck route roadway down that and creating another loud area on that very distinctive pathway that's already organically moving in the direction where it's a very people-pleasant place, and it also respects history and people, old-timey activities with walking and all of that business, and not a busy, let's hurry and get the fire engines and the UPS trucks to the next location street. Try to maintain the historical reverence with that. So I know that that's not part of what they have given you on the template that they've shown you in the agenda packet, but there's some other areas that maybe need to be added to this group's specification with roadways or relationships with historic reverence on how that's going to, that streetway and what happens to that, how that's going to fit with all of what you guys truly believe in. I mean, that story touched me like Moonlight was talking about. And I have that same sort of thinking with old timey stuff. I grew up in Wyoming, and I saw a bit of history that's much different than here, but that connects. The railroad thing is definitely a big piece of Arcata.
Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's a little over 2 minutes. Can you wrap up?
Oh boy, I rarely get to talk past my limit. I'm usually wrap it up. Thank you, David, for letting me know.
Yeah. Just when it was getting good too. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Moonlight, you're in the panelist position. Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I guess just I really appreciated both Jim and Chris's comments. Creamery District is a concern with the Playhouse. They've written a formal letter about that, and with the Artisan Action. And L Street is an amazingly evolving space that's just got a life of its own, and it's speaking louder and louder. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so back to the committee then. I'll share this again. So again, just I guess the ask is whether you wish to pick up in any of your general comments that you had before, or start digging into the specific policies in the table that we sent you, or to anything else that's in the Gateway Area Plans of interest to the committee.
I think we're all tired.
Another alternative is, yeah, exactly. So you could continue, or if you feel like you've reviewed this and you appreciate the policy that's in here and you don't have comments, you can also just continue it on. Recommend the policy as is. That's another option for you. So
I have
3 different pathways.
David, what is a by right approval?
That is basically a ministerial approval where there's no discretionary hearings held or other city review. Basically, the way that the Gateway is structured, the way the Gateway Plan is structured and presented in its draft format right now, the community is going through all of this work right now to identify what it wants to see out of development in the future, what it wants to see about preservation, what it wants to see about circulation, where we want to see parks, what kinds of amenities we want to see out of projects. And then instead of having each project then, once we've decided that, come back and then go through a discretionary process, the idea is that those projects would come and we'd be able to verify against a checklist that they meet the design criteria, that they've provided the amenities that the community has said that it wants, and that instead of dumping time, energy, and money into a public process, we put that time, energy, and money into the community itself. And so a part of that, a critical part of that process is that once we've done this work, we're doing in essence, what we're doing is one massive project review now. Once we've done that work, then projects that come in and demonstrate that they meet those objectives, those objective standards that we've outlined, we say yes to them. We don't put them through another process. Now, that ministerial review can have public hearings. That's been a concern of some people. Well, are you just going to have staff members, making these decisions, behind closed doors? We can have notice. We can have hearings, for certain size projects. It makes sense to have the, Planning Commission, for example, make that discussion and decision that, yes, we believe they've met all these criteria, check, 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 and then approve the project, or no, they haven't met these criteria, check, check, and then you need to meet these to go through, the ministerial process. But essentially, the by right, what that means is that landowner has the right to do that project without having further decision-making applied to that decision.
Well, this sounds like it's conforming with the kind of trajectory you've encouraged our committee to consider for years. The idea of streamlining and making things easier. I appreciate your description of that.
Yeah, and I do want to be clear that the streamlining is not only for, because some people have been a little cynical about this idea of streamlining is important to the community. Myself, in my life, I don't have the resources that a developer has. If I did, I would want to bring those resources to bear on the community and provide for them. So having a streamlined process would make me happy. But what I have had the pleasure of doing is needing the resources that a developer has built. I've needed a house to live in. I've needed a building to go work in, and et cetera. And so that streamlining also improves my life as a resident, as a non-developer in the community. And so it also creates additional transparency that we're having this process now. We're having it full open in the public. Everyone can participate. And so I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that, all of this streamlining has just led to, a giveaway to developers. It's a synergy, and we're putting on the table, this is what our community wants out of this process from the developers. If you want to develop in our community, this is what we're going to ask of you. Sorry for that little tangent.
Appropriate streamlining. The Creamery District, I hear that word a lot. When we say Creamery District, what sense of the word district are we referring to? Are we talking about a district with regards to CEQA cultural resources, or what is the Creamery District? Maybe I just need some clarification on what that is. I see here we're talking about the Creamery building property, and then the Creamery District landmark.
I think it's kind of related to the public comment in some sense. I don't think we have a historic district identified right now. We have a series of buildings that seem basically all kind of interconnected that everyone understands to be the Creamery District. Is that right, David?
Yeah, so the Creamery District is, in current zoning, there's actually two land use districts, if you will. There's Creamery District A and Creamery District B. And for all intents and purposes, they're a specific zoning designation that encompasses certain properties within the area around the Creamery building itself. That zoning designation, when the gateway is approved, when the zoning for the gateway is approved, that zoning designation will be eliminated. So it'll be completely replaced by the zoning designation of the Creamery. I'm sorry, of the gateway. The Creamery District also has sort of a vernacular use. There's a sign. You can come up onto 7th Street. It says, F Street, Creamery District this way. The Creamery District has boundaries that are identified on, city maps that were largely defined from, the process that we went through to create those zoning districts. That Creamery District designation has it's important to the placemaking. It's important to that neighborhood as a specific designation of place. I don't think that you're going to be able to find a historic district within those boundaries. I could be wrong. Again, I'm not the expert. I don't think that that's what that designation is intended to do. We do plan on retaining the district as a place through this process. And so you'll still see on city maps, Creamery District, you'll see little signs pointing to the Creamery District so people can orient and get to that place. Honestly, as far as I can remember, tonight is the first time that I've ever heard anyone suggest that the Creamery District should be considered a historic district. So that's not what's in the draft right now. That's not what's being proposed.
Although, and I did bring up the areas A and B, if you guys want to see that, but I did want to just note too that I think Jim's comment may have been specifically about designating the parcel itself. And we do have a plan development overlay that exists on that already. And if there were things we wanted to, modify specifically to that site, that would just be a separate process, but it's not off the table entirely, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, the Creamery building, the property that the Creamery building is on, if I misunderstood, I apologize, but that site, that parcel is a historic, it has a historic overlay on it. It is designated as a historic resource.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to lose me. So if we want to take a vote, can we talk about whether or not we want to do this at a separate meeting, or we want to deal with this now? I'm getting kicked out of my office because the cleaning crew is here, and I can drive home and then I can come back if you guys are still here. But
Well, I'll just comment that I did read this and I did feel all the criteria laid out. Actually, it was very clear to me what I was reading. I thought it really mirrored the guidelines up above. As for the guidelines, I think we do, again, the idea of looking at other types of architectural styles might need to be integrated into something here, maybe, because it is referenced through some of the items down below too. But when I read it made sense. I thought it was, and the guiding principles all made sense to me, and it kind of fit with what we've been talking about. So.
I guess what I would recommend if the committee feels like they have, do not require additional deliberations and you want to make a vote on these policies now, then carry that forward. But I also want to respect that Jill's getting kicked out of her office. So we could also pick this up again at your next regular meeting.
I can go either way. I appreciate what Tim said, and I agree. It is clearly laid out. So long as we have the ability to review it at a future date, should we, in particular, decide to adopt other architectural styles as significant, I would be fine with going forward with this.
Well, Jill, maybe tell us how you feel. Your opinion will matter here. If you think we can
I like the document. I think the document's good. And I think as long as we can add to it, if we have to, based on, what Ron said, I think that we should adopt it. We've been kicking this around for a while.
I support that. So maybe we entertain a motion at this time.
Right.
To adopt
Ron, why don't Ron, you make that motion?
Yeah, I can make that motion. I motion that we approve this motion as written, with an eye to potential revisions as needed by the council ever. I don't know. That's not well said. Let's take it as written for now, to be reviewed annually.
Does this require public kind of comment on this, or
You've already taken public comment.
However, I forgot. Okay.
I second.
Okay.
We're doing it. So I guess what I'm capturing is adopting as written with the opportunity to modify in future. Ron, does that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Well said. You had a great teacher in high school.
Heck yeah, I did. So many good teachers, including.
So it sounds like we have a motion in a second. Dilo appears to have captured that. I want to make sure we don't feel rushed, that we all as a committee together feel confident on this, and that we don't feel rushed by the cleaning crew. Okay. In light of that, and seeing no further need for massive discussion here on the subject, I think it would be appropriate now for Dilo to take a roll call.
Okay. Chair Rich.
Aye. Yes.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Aye.
Committee Member Keith.
Approve.
Okay, and Committee Member Perry.
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you all so much. That feels really good.
Thanks for all your hard work. I mean, I think that we've been beating this drum for a long, long time, and it feels really, really good to get something off the plate, move it forward. And if we do need to make revisions, I mean, that's what the committee is about.
Agreed.
So thank you for your hard work, both of you, David and Dilo.
Thanks.
Yes,
this is such a good vibe meeting, you guys. I wish all of our meetings could be like this. That's so nice. Well, I hate to do this to you. I had a really quick report, but I feel like Jill could probably fall off, and we still have quorum. So.
I'll see you guys. Bye.
Hi, Jill.
Thanks, Jill.
Okay. Chair Rich, is it okay if I move us into committee and staff communications?
Yes, it is.
So 2 things really quick. One, at our next meeting, we will be revisiting the historical preservation element. In advance of that, I hope to get the draft modifications that we'll be bringing to the committee to the TIPOs as well, if they want to weigh in, or maybe even just sit in on that meeting. I'm planning to offer that up unless the committee has any concerns with that. So we will begin, fleshing out any modifications. Nothing, extremely out of left field, I don't think, but just based on the engagement we've, and the conversations we've been having over the last few years. And then the second thing I wanted to note before we adjourn is that the City Council officially adopted its tribal land acknowledgement statement at its last City Council meeting. And I just wanted to share that language really quick with the committee. And, just wanted to provide this to you as an FYI. I know that it's something that the committee maybe would be interested in, and there might be an opportunity to incorporate it into the update to the historical preservation element or segments of it that are appropriate. So those are my reports. Is there anything else from the committee?
Dilo, thanks for bringing this up. It was something on my list to talk about tonight, was to make sure that the boundary of the gateway that, and I imagine you already are doing that, is passed through the three we are representing TIPOs to make sure. I know that all three TIPOs years past have looked at this area and designated a confidential map that's held by you at the city. And so to revisit that, and I think you might find that there are circles, lines, or dots on that map that you need to keep track of in confidence. And so knowing that you're doing that, that makes me really happy. I wanted to thank all of our commenters. And also, Ron, am I correct in acknowledging that you will now be the new principal of Arcata High School?
I am the new principal of Arcata High School. That's why I've missed the last two meetings.
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations on that, sir. You've got my daughter as an incoming sophomore, and I look forward to meeting you. So
I
just wanted to make sure. Good job, Ron.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we have been talking about historic projects that take the kids out of the classroom and into the community, but that's for another day.
It will come up when we talk about the historical preservation element and educational opportunities and incentives. So
absolutely,
come back to it. All right.
Thanks all.
Great meeting. Looks like we're finishing a record time, 6:27.
Thank you. Yep, we're adjourning the meeting at 6:27 p.m. Thank you all. Hope you have a great night.
Okay, thank you, everybody.